I'm Vince B.
I'm David A. Price.
And I'm Queequeg.
You're not Queequeg. What's wrong with you? You're Jason Wood.
That's true, I am. And you're listening to
Southern Fried Geekery. Yeah.
Woohoo!
I don't have any Zen.
I just want you to be prepared.
Just take your little rake with you.
And you're not going to be.
You're
not going to be alone. There's going to be people hollering their.
See, I'm hoping. Okay. So just because I started recording and this didn't catch up, but I made a comment about 2 minutes ago that and I realized that I've been harping, and if you follow me on Facebook, I talk about 0 other things in law school right now, and I too am annoyed by that. I would love to have something else to talk about. I just have nothing else to talk about. It is an all-consuming thing in my life, and so I made the comment that my last final is on Wednesday, and I think after the final on Wednesday, I'm going to go and get my copy of Sandman, which I've been like pecking away at, like a little bird who's just pecking little bugs out of sand, like little bits and pieces. I'm getting it knocked out. I'm going to go sit on top of a local, Matt calls it a hill. It's called Pinnacle Mountain. It's kind of a hill. It's a big granite rock in the middle of the state that you can go climb and you can sit on. And so I said I'm going to take my copy of Sandman up and go sit on top of Pinnacle Mountain and read alone without
Sandman,
humans.
there's some light, easy reading for you in your break.
It'll make me feel better. and Craig's response to that, I'll let you say it. What was your response to that, Craig?
Oh, you better come in on Wednesday and hang out with us instead of going out onto the mountain. Your first fucking Wednesday off and
forever,
it seems like.
A lifetime.
He's trying to decide between us and the trees.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
But so I mean, it's not really that though. Like the idea of going and like reading a comic on top of a rock in the middle of the state with not seeing another human, that sounds amazing to me right now. Like that sounds really like I'm not one of those reconnect with nature guys. Like I don't need to go out and like put my dick in the dirt to like reconvene with the animal spirits or whatever. I just don't want to be around humans and buildings. I want society to have been a wasteland. I need there not to be another man-made structure near me, and that's what I want.
Animal spirits.
Fair.
I mean, I really don't want to put my dick in the dirt. Like
Well, I
don't know. That could be feeling. Get a little moist.
No kink shaming.
Bury
here,
a hole.
Yeah. Your kinks are your kinks, man.
I don't want to fuck the ground.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
It's not
I don't blame you. You don't know where that ground's been.
What diseases it carries with it.
Who else has put themselves in that ground?
Lots of people.
That is not a
Pretty
thing
much
I want to do.
everybody that's lived on this earth and died before us has put themselves in that ground.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
It's a cycle, man. You know what?
The circle of life.
Matt has changed his position on this. This started off in a weird place.
It is the circle of life.
I have concerns, and I don't necessarily feel good about this plan anymore.
And no matter what you may be thinking now, this is not a podcast about reconvening with nature and fucking Earth.
What is it a podcast about, Craig?
Comic books.
Yes, it is. It faux show is. This is episode 102 and 102.
2 more episodes, and we've been doing this for 2 fucking years.
Dude, I didn't even put that together. That blows my mind. We are the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. As per usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie, and I am here with my friends.
Matt Trogdon.
And I'm Craig Lance.
And we're glad to be back and doing this. If you are new to the show, what you might be saying, like this started off in a weird place, and you're right, it did. We digress. We go to some strange places sometimes, and that's okay. It makes it interesting. But we convene once a week. We drink some coffee or Diet Mountain Dews if you're Craig. We hang out because we're just a group of guys. We sit in the middle of Arkansas. We love funny books, and we like to talk about them because they're great. Why wouldn't you love them? We talk about other geek culture things too, but mainly this podcast does in fact center around sequential art, funny books, comics, whether they be funny or serious. We enjoy the medium, so we like to chat about it. We like to consider ourselves somewhat educated fellows. Of men of the world, if you will. Now, whether or not other people agree with that assessment, that's their business, not
We're
mine.
at least well read in the sequential art.
We try to be. We are ever expanding. So in order to do that, we get together about once a week, like I said, usually Sunday mornings, and we talk about either we all read the same book, and then we chat about it, and then we bring other books to the table that we've each read, and we just dive through it. Now, in saying that, some of the books are, I mean, at least one of them are definitely going to be brand new, off the shelf. Last Wednesday, we picked it up, we read it, and so that means that you might not have a chance to have consumed it yet, right? Like it's maybe you're busy like we all are, and you just haven't had a chance to get to your books, and you haven't had a chance to read this brand new book. So that's in saying that, I wanted to give you a spoiler warning. You can't get mad at us because I've said the words spoiler warning. That's the rule. That's just how life works. And
have you met the internet? They can get mad about everything.
I ignore quite a bit of it. I put a lot of energy. I fuck the dirt and then ignore the internet. That's kind of just what I'm doing today. I'm tired.
There's a lot of dirt out there.
There's a lot of literally a lot of ground to cover. So we do try to be real well read, though. We try to cover a lot of ground when we are reading comics, and so in saying that, what did you guys read this week? Let's warm up our brains, so to speak, by talking about what we might have read this week. What are your short stacks?
Who's going first? Me?
Yeah, you go first. You look like you're a go first kind of guy today.
All right. Image Comics Dead Eyes #3 by Jerry Dugan, John McCrae, Mike Spicer, and Joe Sabino. So we finally get some new material.
I was gonna ask if this was the first new one.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, as most of you are aware, this had to start over due to some legality issues. When it first started. So this is the first time that we've gotten some new material with this story, and it's great. I love it. I'm so glad that this story didn't die. I was really afraid that it did because I was digging it so much. Jerry Dugan writing just a straight up crime story. Everything I've read from him when he does that, I really liked. And it's nice to see John McCrae working again. I haven't seen him do anything in quite a long time. So I'm really digging what he's doing with this series as well.
Same.
So I highly recommend it. It's a really good, interesting read. It's very entertaining. A lot of humor too. Obviously, Jerry Dugan's going to do humor in just about everything he does. I also read from Dark Horse. I read Crone #2. So we had roundtabled this book. This is from Dennis Culver, Justin Greenwood, Brad Simpson, and Pat Brousseau. This. I'm mentioning this one because at the end of the first issue, the writer mentioned the story going places, unexpected places, and the end of this one certainly did. The end of this, it felt very formulaic until you get to the last page. Like, okay,
I like that they explained her costume, though.
Yeah, and they did
that.
that
Was one of your complaints in the roundtable.
One of my comments was the costume felt very generic.
Yeah.
And they mentioned their strategy behind that.
Okay.
So that was cool. That was interesting.
Yeah.
But
was that in the back matter, or was that
No, it's in the story.
It's in the story
Really?
itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
They kind of dig into her history a little bit, and that's just one of the things that was mentioned.
So I had a woe is me moment this past week when I did break away to come pick up my books of the week that I have not read yet. I apparently was not on the pull list for that book, and I did not get the second issue, so I've got to go scrounge for it.
You can borrow mine if you want to.
So also #3, I read, and I'm mentioning this one on purpose because Craig mentioned it last week, was DC's Black Label John Constantine Hellblazer #1. This is the Simon Spurrier, Aaron Campbell, and Jordi Belair book. So this was really interesting. I liked this story. I like the character of John Constantine. He's very often incorrectly portrayed, in my opinion. I mean, and I'm saying incorrectly based on how he was introduced and launched. And so I'm interested to see how this is going to go. It's starting off, it feels right as far as Constantine's attitude and really what he does. But it sure feels like a Simon Spurrier story.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure. I mean, you got a clairvoyant who uses an amputated arm and a pile of meat to observe what's going on around him.
So I really need to reread this issue because I was left. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I really liked it, but I felt like there was a lot more content in it than I actually absorbed.
Yeah.
When I got to the end of it, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys have ever read a comic and been at the end like, what did I just read? I feel like I'm confused.
Yeah, it makes it really hard to find a way in. It's not very accessible. And I haven't read this issue, so I have no idea. But from what you're describing, like accessibility issues in comics are a real thing. And part of that with John Constantine, at least in my experience having read him, so I'm a quote unquote millennial. I'm 32. John Constantine came out. It's kind of a before my time thing. And his character, I think a lot of what you're talking about, Matt, it's so rooted in that late 70s, early 80s punk scene. And as society and time and the world kind of moves away from understanding what that late 70s, early 80s punk scene was, it makes it really hard to understand a character so heavily rooted in that, I think. And I mean, like I said, I haven't read this most recent issue, but I've gone back and like read the original Hellblazer series, at least the first like trade of it, and then I've read some of the more recent in the last like 5 years stuff, and there's a disconnect there where I think the writers are trying to break away from that and take him into a different place, and it doesn't necessarily work if you know the history of the character. And I wonder if that's a problem.
Well, he's a very complex character.
Well, I mean, I'm inclined to think that the way the character was introduced is more challenging of a character to write than what he tends to be. In essentially, that is, Constantine's magic is low-level magic.
Yeah.
He's not a high-level magician.
No, he's a hedge mage. Yeah.
You know, and so his wit is what gets him out of trouble. That's what makes his story so interesting to me. Is, you know, he uses his low-level magic, you know, as a supplement to his wit to get him out of, you know, Garth Ennis wrote him that way and wrote him very well that way. I mean, he outsmarts the devil in one meeting with some very low level magic, but it's his wit that gets him
He's
around
very
those things.
clever.
But it's hard to write that way. It's a lot easier to write, you know, I use
Doctor
my magic.
Strange.
Yeah, I'd use my magic to do things,
Right.
and this is what I do, and so on. And so, I mean, it feels right going in as far as the way he's portraying Constantine, and Spurrier's English, so
Yeah.
you know, those guys talk. I hear.
Check that one off the list. What'd you read this week, Craig?
So I read the same books as Matt, but I actually didn't put them on my short stack because I figured somebody else was going to. So I read Marauders #2, Marvel Comics, Jerry Dugan, Michelle Bandini, Elisabetta D'Amico, and Federico Blee. Anybody else reading the Marauder stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's becoming one of my favorite X-Men books out of the new X titles. Right now you have this thing going on where you have a pool for who's going to be the Red King. And, you know, Emma's going to win it, but, you know, Sebastian's trying to set his son up to be the Red so that he has the second vote in their triune, and she's trying to put her person in so she has the second vote. So you kind of have this struggle between the two to get the third king set up. Then I read Outer Darkness #12, Image Comics, John Layman and Neifu Chan. This book just continues to be freaking amazing. I know Matt and I talk about it all the time, but this ended what they called season 1 of this book. So I'm assuming there's going to be a brief pause while they get some trades out and let people get caught up. But man, if you're not on this book, you really, really need to be reading it because it is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I heard a fun little rumor
Yes.
revolving around this book that popped out this week, and I know you were really excited about
I
it.
am excited. Rob Guillory announced that there's going to be a Chew crossover with Outer Darkness.
Yeah.
Which all I can imagine is somehow the aliens that left the message on Earth and Chew are going to be ran into in the Outer Darkness universe is what I feel like.
We're going to get Space Poyo?
I don't give. I'll take any polio I can get. And then my third book was X-Men #3, Marvel Comics, Jonathan Hickman, Francis Lionel Yu, and others. There was like 10 people that worked on this book, so I'm not going to read them all. I mean, I don't know what else we can say about the X-Men books that we haven't been saying, but this book just continues to be Hickman at his absolute finest. And it just keeps going and going, and you know they're dealing with consequences of Charles Xavier, and they're dealing with this thing that's happening where in the Savage Land the Horde culture, or Sebastian Shaw called them the Whore culture, which is a group of 4 old women are trying to take over the seeds of Krakoa and change the flowers that Krakoa is planting. But so there's this whole thing going on where they're trying to protect that. And
they're, you know, because they
work for a corporation that stole their ideas is what.
And what the issue explores is, you know, everything that was laid out as far as only mutants can use the Krakoan gates.
Yeah.
Well, these
Unless
women,
you're Kitty Pryde.
These women are bioengineers, and they cracked that code.
Oh, nice.
So there's a hole in that in that iron gate that they thought that the
Excited
mutants-
to get in and check that
And
out.
they're
going to decide whether all of humanity will be able to use it, or just the mutants, or no one.
Right.
And these 4 old women, which, I mean, there's some funny scenes like
their interaction with
at one point one of them gets knocked over and she starts, "Oh, you broke my hip, and so they're like, "Oh, we're sorry," and she's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I do I do
I
yoga,
do water aerobics.
water
because they're all octogenarians. They're like 80 years old. It's damn.
it was really freaking good. The
Okay,
first
boomer.
human villains that they come across are 4 80-year-old women that they're fighting. It's fucking great.
Yeah,
And it worked.
Do you going back to, you said Marauders? Do you like Marauders better than X-Force?
I like both of them pretty equal.
Do you?
The one that I'm surprised that I'm not enjoying as much as I thought I would is New Mutants, because it's a Hickman book.
I'm with you.
But it's just, I don't care what's happening with it. It doesn't tie into the rest of it. It's its own thing, and I just don't really care what's happening with it.
I don't care about the characters.
I
have no
don't
background with
typically either. I got on it because Hickman was going to be a major part of it, and I thought it would tie in more with what's going on, but it's not.
And apparently
So,
Hickman's only on the first part of that anyway, and Al Ewing's taking it over and taking it his own direction, which Al Ewing is great. But
I'll probably stay on it just till Al Ewing gets on it to see where he takes it, to see if it actually does tie back in. But right now they're in space, and I just don't fucking... I dropped off the X-Men books in the early 2000s when it was all the Shi'ar space stuff, and I just don't really care about it.
Well,
it doesn't affect what happens on Earth.
yeah.
Mutants, I don't really care that much about it, if that makes sense.
No,
No, it does.
It
I'm
does.
with you.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, time was a commodity this week that I didn't have a lot of. So instead of like trying to pick and choose like one thing, trying to dig through a whole story, I pulled out of my little library a whole lot of anthologies and collections, like short story comic collections. So just when I catch a break and I need like a breather, I can grab it, open it up, read 4 pages, and get kind of a complete thing. And
And
then
like you were busy
go
with
back
something
to-
other than comics this week, and that's just...
life is hell. So pro tip to anybody thinking about going to law school: number 1, don't. Number 2, if you make the mistake that I did, I'm joking, obviously, I'm having a good time with it, it's just stressful and hard. Finals will make you sad and hate yourself a lot. So that's kind of where I live at right now. So I pulled down these anthologies and short stories collections, and I got just a plethora of really, really entertaining like little snippets of comics. And so the first one I pulled down and started checking out and flipping through some pages, it's called You Don't Say, which is a short story collection by Nate Powell, the same guy who drew March, if you guys have read that. Phenomenal artist, love him to death. It's mostly just little snippets of these slices of life stories. It's about being a dad, being a father, life with his husband. His wife wrote a few of them, and it's just kind of these little stories about living in a world, a really hectic world, and about just letting yourself being human. And those were especially in a world where we are constantly running and trying to do stuff, reminding yourself to be a person and reminding yourself about the little moments in life that's a good breath of fresh air. That's a good life check that we all need to take sometimes. Then I pulled down an anthology series. So last year I had the privilege and the pleasure of going up to Portland to a literary convention, and while I was there, I hit up our friends Russ and Lilia, who live there. Lilia she's going she's getting her master's degree at the University of Portland College of the Arts, and she's a phenomenal artist.
Art science, right?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure of the names, but while I was there and visiting them, she took me to her studio and she was giving me a tour. And of course, as tends to do whenever I jump into a conversation with artists and artsy type people, we start talking about sequential art, comics, and stuff like that. And one of the people there was just like, "Hey, the Portland College of the Arts put out an anthology comic series. Would you like to check it out?" And obviously the answer to that was yes. So I grabbed it, and this book was called Unversed. It was edited by Jonathan Hill, and it's a student anthology put together by these grad students at the University of Portland. And the stories in it, they're very queer, they're very emotive, they're very activist based. They're very much about these young people trying to make sense of the world. And if they can't make sense of it, they're at least going to scream at the assholes that are hijacking it from them. And I thought it was really, really cool. It really sets you in the mind of people who who are in the art community and the things that they focus on and the things that they worry about, and trying to understand the artistic mind and the development of that. And look, Portland is its own world anyway. It is very much its own little like porthole into a weird, funky, psychedelic universe where like conventions are just broken. And I love it. I love it there. And so it was really fun reading this, and I really appreciate them, number one, putting it together and getting me a copy of it. It was phenomenal. I actually have the 2018 and the 2017 version, so I got a whole ass other book I haven't read yet.
Nice.
It's just really fun, and the art it goes from extremely like classic draftsmanship, people who have studied anatomy, and then it goes to this really loose, like R. Crumb style based, underground comic style. Like it just ranges the gamut, and it's just fun. And then last but certainly not least, just for funsies more than anything, have you guys ever heard of the book The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Stories?
No.
So this is I guarantee you, if you have anybody out there who is my age, remember children's books, they've read this. This is quote unquote a picture book. It's not necessarily a comic, but it's absolutely sequential art. It takes these fairy tale stories, these kind of classic, just different things that we all know. You read them as children's stories, like they're just part of the zeitgeist, and it puts like this postmodern twist on them. There's no small degree of cynicism and cheap wine and distrust thrown into the making of this book. There's the story of the big bad wolf, except the big bad wolf is not like, it's just misunderstood. They use, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. If you are a fan of like the art style of Bill Sienkiewicz, this is a really cool take on like the multimedia, rip the paper up, glue it down, make something that's not just like classic art, and then print it style thing. Like I said, I love postmodern art. I love postmodern comics. I think they're cool. And so this was just a real fun way to revisit that. So if you like cynicism, if you like takes on classic stories through an unexpected lens, it's good times. So those were the books I covered this week.
Yeah.
Good times all around.
Good on you for getting some stuff read.
I tried. And again, that's what I love about anthologies. You take these little breaks, little 5-minute breaks, whatever you're doing. If your day is hectic, you don't have time to read a 28-page comic, take a little bitty break, read 4. Get a full story, go back to what you're doing, man. Just reset your clock. And for me, that's what comics do. For me, comics reset a clock. If I'm ever like getting super stressed and I need to remember, hey, like there's a day after today. There's a world outside of this. There's life that goes on. Grab an anthology book, man. Read 4 pages. Look how the panels connect to each other. Go back to the basics of what comics are and reset your internal clock. And then go about your day and be more functional. Get your shit done. For me, that's what comics do, and that's why I love anthology series.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
So do we want to, let's go into the round table. Let's do that. So we all got together and read a book. In the interest of time, Matt so graciously volunteered last week. He's
Well,
like,
we
hey.
kind of volunteered him
Okay,
for it.
yeah. Well, let's. I was trying to sound better than what I am. He got voluntold. I looked at Craig and Matt, and I was like, guys, I need one of y'all to take this up.
And I said, Matt, sounds like you.
Yeah, Craig pulled the not it. Straw.
Put my finger on my nose and said, hey, Matt, I think this is on you.
So why don't I'm just going to hand the baton off to you, Matt. Why don't you tell everybody what we're doing?
So we're talking about Dark Horse Comics' The Butcher of Paris #1 by Stephanie Phillips, Dean Kotz, and Jason Wordie. This is a story that's based on actual events. Mm-hmm. The setting is Nazi-occupied Paris in 1944. So in short, this comic, so this is about some French civilians that are helping French Jews to flee the country in order to avoid Nazi capture and deportment. Some of those whom are aiding the Jews do so for benevolent reasons, but there are others whom only help the Jews for their own financial gain. Mm-hmm. These people see an opportunity to take advantage of Jews' desperation and extort them for extreme financial payments. Mm-hmm. One Frenchman named Dreyfus, whom has been discovered by the SS to be a Jewish sympathizer, is captured. He's then threatened and extorted until he agrees to infiltrate the French resistance. Dreyfus makes contact with the resistance via the SS's instructions, and the local leader of the resistance cell agrees to help Dreyfus flee the country, but advises that it will cost him, as it does everybody. He is sent to an address to make contact with a man who will get him the proper paperwork needed to facilitate his escape. This is the contact the SS has been searching for.
Right.
Is, they know about the resistance in France. They know where these people, at least one cell, gathers, but they don't know who is facilitating the escape for these Jews.
Yeah, they're looking for the crack in the armor.
Right.
So Dreyfus is told by the SS to go meet this man and get his name by any means necessary. Mm-hmm. We see Dreyfus arrive at the address, and the door is answered by a man who calls himself Dr. Marcel Petois, and he cheerfully invites Dreyfus inside. The next scene is of the French authorities responding to a report of fire at the same address, and upon investigating the scene, a gruesome scene of human mutilation has been discovered in the lowest level of the home. And that is where this issue ends. Mm-hmm. So I'm a war buff, war nerd. I'm also a true crime nerd as well. So this is an intersection of two interests of mine. And I am greatly looking forward to where this story goes. I did not see the first issue ending this way at all. I thought we would have kind of a slower burn.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, I thought, it'd be more about setting the scene and digging into the Nazi this and the French that. And it's like, nope.
They ripped the Band-Aid off.
Mutilation, last page. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm really looking forward to this series. I really like the way it was illustrated. Mm-hmm. I thought the art was good. It was interesting. It was different. Kind of it looked like inks done over rough pencils. And, the penciler also did the inking, I noticed. Mm-hmm. Sequentially, did its job very well sequentially. The story was easy to follow. I went back and read it a couple of times. The author at the end kind of does a little, I don't know what you would call it, a synopsis, explanation, whatever, into why this comic has been made.
Yeah.
She's a war nerd, and she learned about this story in passing as she was reading another war story. Mm-hmm. She has Jewish family, Jewish family that was affected by the Holocaust. So, frankly, I'm really surprised I didn't know about this already. It's like, how did this escape my radar? Because I've read several books on Nazi occupation. I've read and watched documentaries about Nazis until people that know me are like, will you please quit that?
But it sounds like something they keep hush hush. I mean,
because
I've never heard of it. You'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
Stephanie Phillips had never heard of it until she was reading another book, and she said it was one line. Yeah. She was just like, "Hey, this happened," and they moved on. And she had to go like Google sleuthing to find it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's understandable, given what the Nazis did and how something like this, was kind of brushed over in the greater evil of what happened in Europe at the time. Well, it's just surprising that it hadn't crossed my radar.
And to flip that, so I want to know what Craig thought about this book as well. But this wasn't necessarily the Nazis doing this. So it wasn't at all the Nazis. This was a Frenchman. So this was an incredibly terrifying and terrible thing being happened under the umbrella of this other insanely terrifying and threatening things. Like, it's very easy to lose sight of that, because any book you get into where you include, Nazis are always going to be the big monster. They're always going to be the big monster in the book, and so you put a lesser evil in there that's inherently more threatening, and that's a weird dynamic, right?
Yeah.
If you were going to be a serial killer in France during occupied France during the World War II would be the time to do it, because who the fuck's going to notice a couple of missing people?
Well, and I've heard, and I've heard about this kind of thing before. I read a story about there was a serial killer using the Civil War as an opportunity to kill.
Yeah, how are you going to notice people missing during wartime?
Well, and so beyond that too, there's a few really cool detective stories written about people who used what was happening in Eastern Europe during the Cold War, where the Gestapo would disappear people all the time. So when you don't know who's making people disappear and for what reasons, it's really
Right, because people are going to
It's a good
assume,
cover.
it was just
Yeah.
the Gestapo or it was
Yeah.
just the SS that took them or whatever.
The government
so-
dropped you out.
yeah.
There's stories about people who used 9/11 to cover up murder that had connections with it. And they just assumed people were disappearing.
Use evil to cover up evil.
Right now, like we are finding out right now that people are murdering undocumented immigrants and making the bodies disappear, and then just saying, "Hey, ICE must have got them." Like that's happening right now in our own country.
Yep.
And so this is it's a really interesting take. I enjoyed the story, and I've read books drawn by Dean Kotz as well. He did the Warlord of Mars Attacks miniseries for Dynamite not too long ago, which I like crossovers, and so you give me a chance to get some action with some John Carter of Mars. I'm gonna check test that out, see what that's about. And so I'm used to his art. I don't think this. It's pretty standard Dean Kotz if you read it. He's not pushing the envelope here. He's kind of in that same school. He's a little bit more structured than like Tyler Crook, if that makes sense. The guy who did Harrow County.
Yeah.
So he does a lot of watercolor work. His lines are loose, but in saying that, I think he is more. Tyler Crook is looser. I'm just using that as kind of a pinpoint so you can maybe understand if you're listening to this and see his art. The story was great. I don't know if it's just me maybe needing to get used to reading other comics per se. Like I felt like there was a little bit of a jumping issue in between, and maybe, like that's been my. If you listen to the last couple episodes, the last books we've read, I've had some structure issues with the way they're doing things, and I think that might just be me, like because I'm slowly realizing.
I certainly didn't get that feeling reading this.
It was.
book,
I mean, the story moved quickly.
Yeah, it was
there's
a
no doubt
very
about it.
fast
I mean, you
story.
think about where the story began and where it
Yeah.
ended. I did not see the story progressing this quickly in the first.
No, it
issue.
flew.
well, so the same thing. I got to the end of it and I was like, okay, and I kind of went back and I didn't reread it, but I went through it. I looked at it again and looked at the art again and so forth. I really like the story, but I like Matt to a lesser degree. As far as war stories,
I
am,
like Matt to a lesser degree, and then there was a
I didn't
long
say
pause.
let me back up. Like Matt, to a lesser degree, I love historical fiction.
Right.
But mine doesn't necessarily have to be revolved around war or true crime. I just like historical fiction. This fits right into that. And I really, really enjoyed the story. It was fast-paced. There was a lot happening. And I'm going to say about halfway through it, I was like, wait, I thought this was about a serial killer. Where's the serial killing? And then, well, of course, you get it, and you get it big.
I assumed we were going to get a little bit longer, more of the story was going to be about who's disappearing, how many have, how are they disappearing? I just, but it seems like we're going to get more, the more of the story is going to be about the chase.
Right.
And that I like as much as not even more.
Right.
And at its heart, it's a detective story. I mean, so one of I say the main figures of the story is going to be this father-son dynamic where there's an older gentleman who's a detective, his son's a reporter as they're going through the things. And that's your team. So this book picks up on a lot of the tropes of detective fiction. So where you're at with war stories, I love detective stories. Like Dashiell Hammett I love his work. And this picks up on a lot of those classic detective stories. It even mentions Sherlock Holmes. That's a big key in detective
Oh,
stories.
wait, am I your Watson?
Yeah, you throw it back to the previous work. Like this hits those points. So it's a very formulaic detective story, but it's packed with a lot of nuance. And I forget what comic it was, and I forget who the author of it was, but several episodes back, Matt, you mentioned that you, being a big fantasy buff, at one point in your time reached out and tried to find fantasy that wasn't just written by old white guys. It's not hard to find now that we live in a world where everything's searchable on Google, but the majority of your detective stories, period, are not written by women.
Correct. Yeah.
And so this was a neat take on a classic trope. Again, a lot of your stories about detective fiction are very much pushed by men. So this was taking a lot of those male-driven and male-centric tropes, and it was putting a little bit of a twist on it from a female perspective. But it's light. It's not a heavy female perspective. It's light, like where the guy who ends up getting disappeared, they drag him in, and part of the thing that's going to be my verb. That's a verb now. He gets disappeared. The guy who just ends up getting the first essential victim, when the SS drags him in, they don't just drag him in. They drag his wife in, or she follows him along, and she's like, "Why are you arresting my husband? What's up with this? He didn't do anything wrong." And the way that they mistreat her, and the way that they insinuate certain things, which inevitably don't take place, and I thought that was good. The way that the language that the SS officer uses insinuates that what he might be seeking for payment is something other than money. Which, when an SS, an evil person, is talking to a woman, you can imagine what that might be. And it's an allusion to rape. I think in a man's hands, being written like they might have went down that path. Stephanie alludes to that, and then she takes it in a different direction. There's this really uncomfortable moment where the SS is being assholes. Just uncomfortable moments with the SS where they're
that one scene with the SS got a little uncomfortable.
Well, the tension is there, and it's built
when he
in.
broke out his hanger,
Well,
and he thought he was going to use it as a torture device, and then he just hung his coat on it.
Right. There's that tension that's built up in the story through the juxtaposition of what might happen, and I think a lot of that has to do with our baggage of reading these male-written detective stories, and now we're getting a different. We're getting a woman writing this detective story, and she takes it there, she builds the tension, and then she moves it in a way that's not it doesn't abuse a woman at the extent of a man's story, and I think that is a problem that we get in a lot of stories written by men, and I think she does that in a way that's perfect, to a point that if you're not, if that's not a thing that concerns you, you might just miss it. And I think that's what's great about the writing. I think it's incredibly well done. And in juxtaposition, I think the expressionism of Cots really brings that. Like, that helps build the tension. So I thought that part by itself was fascinating. Sequential work.
Yeah, I'll remain on this book.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to see where it's going. I want to see what happens. I'm interested in the characters. Was I the only one that felt like Dreyfus is working with the SS, but he's trying to not work with them?
Well,
or am I wrong?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I had to stop and think. Well,
except they have his wife.
They have his
right?
wife,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
he's given the French Resistance half truths to get what he needs.
Well, this isn't it's not a black and white thing, right? Like there's a spectrum. So he's looking out for himself. He's looking out for his wife. He's inevitably doing the right thing for the wrong reasons and getting Jews out of France. Is he doing a right thing? Yeah, but if you're doing the right things for the wrong reason, are you still doing the right thing? And that's a question that this book's asking, at least in position to him. And so I think that you're supposed to live in the gray with this book.
Yeah,
I think Dreyfus is a character that's deep in the murky waters of what it's like to. Real life is not dualistic. Real life is not you're a good guy, you're bad guy. It's not spy versus spy. And I think he lives.
Good as a point of view. Anakin.
Exactly. Are you a resistance fighter or a terrorist? History is written by the people who win the war.
Right.
And so I think that you're supposed to ask yourself that question, and it's supposed to be a foggy concept. And it's just really well done. I don't know about you guys. Have you guys had a chance to look through the most recent previews catalog?
Yes.
When you get a chance, Matt, I'm curious to know what you think. As I was flipping through there, this year has been tough on Dark Horse.
Yeah.
They got a lot of their licensed properties taken away. And I don't know if you were on the show at the time, but we had the conversation of, is this the death nail for Dark Horse? Is this going to end them? I had to tear corners in half to dog ear in two different directions. There's so much good coming out of Dark Horse next year.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
The previews catalog looks at things 3 months in advance. So you're kind of seeing a window into it. I think where people like Dark Horse, I think they got real close to the edge of losing their company. They scrambled. They put their money going into a different direction. There's some really, really good shit that's about to come out of Dark Horse. Like some really cool stuff that I want to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that has not historically been the case. Like Dark Horse has always been hit or miss for me. I mean, you've got some really cool. I know, they've got some properties that are very much beloved.
The Magnola verse.
Yeah, and they've got
Black Hammer.
They've got Black Hammer. Previously they had Star Wars before Marvel and Disney took that.
Well, they lost within a brief period of time. They lost the Star Wars properties. They lost the Angel and Buffy properties.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of their IPs that they had that belonged to other people. They moved them to different companies. So
and now like Butcher of Paris, I mean that's Dark Horse. Like the story we've been talking about is Dark Horse. There is some good writing that's coming out of that company that in surprising ways. At least as far as the solicitations read, I've never had to focus so much on Dark Horse than I am right now, and like that is very surprising to me. I can't wait for you to look through it because I'm curious if you're going to have the same problem I have, which you can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And especially for somebody who's like right now, I'm not over capes and tights. I'm never going to be over capes and tights. Like superheroes are always going to be a thing that I dearly, they're very beloved to me, right? But I'm really more interested in these other stories, these other genres. And I thought we were going to lose Dark Horse for that. And in a lot of ways, Dark Horse kind of reshifted there for a minute, going after capes and tights, where they were giving us Black Hammer. And Magnolia Universe is always like that's capes and tights. Like I don't care.
it is.
Yeah, it's just that's superhero stories told through a horror lens, but it's still superhero stories. But now they're just giving us so much other stuff. Just raking through it, man. My jaw hit the floor.
Well, I really enjoy what Boom Studios does, and I enjoy what Dark Horse does by giving a step towards creator-owned products. It's maybe not having to go through Image, which there's nothing wrong with Image. I like Image as well. I read a lot of Image, but I like that there's more than one route for people that are wanting to do creator-owned stuff. And as soon as you start eliminating some of those publishers, that's just less avenues for people to take their creator-owned properties down. Yeah. And the more you have of those, the more opportunity people have to actually get published.
Well, I think Image is always going to pull the bigger names, right? And one of the things I've noticed is Image is pulling things that a lot of these. Okay, I'll use for example Kelly Sue and Matt Fraction. Amazing comics writers. When they get time to write comics, they also have their toe dipped into everything else. They work a lot in Hollywood. They're writing a lot for television. Their company, the Milk Fed Productions that they do, they're essentially building things to adapt into film. And I think a lot of writers are using that same launch pad. And that's what, to me, it seems like Image does more and more, at least with the stuff that they push. Like when you're opening previews catalogs, you're seeing the books of the month, like the big spotlight things. A lot of that is stuff by well-known creators who are going to tell really good stories, and they're going to be awesome, don't get me wrong. But it really does seem like Image has become the funnel through which the next big movie is going to happen. And so that's what they're pulling at. Whereas I think Dark Horse, at least in its inception, what it's doing in the future is taking that and they're going to use it to just tell good comic stories. I really don't think that Stephanie Phillips and Dean Kotz are imagining that Butcher of Paris might get turned into a film. I mean, it would be amazing. And I think
or a Netflix series or something of that nature. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where the good adaptations come from, out of comics that were not meant. They were never, there was no inception that they would ever be brought to film. They weren't meant to be adapted into other films. They're not drawn that way.
As comic fans, you can certainly read when you're reading a book and when it's written to be adapted. I mean,
Brian Wood.
Yeah, I mean that's the one I was going to. Yeah. Brian Wood's real notorious for it. Almost everything he puts out, and Mark Millar too. Everything they put out, when you read it, it's like, yeah, this is good. I like it. I'm enjoying it, but it's obviously a Hollywood script.
It's a TV. Yeah, and I loved Briggs Land. Loved it. Mm-hmm. That was a television pitch. I mean, 100% television pitch, man.
Yeah. It felt like Justified.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it felt like I was reading a alternate version of Justified from the perspective of the Kentucky Mafia instead of the Marshall.
Sadly, I don't have to worry about that from Brian Wood's books anymore because he's not getting any more of my money.
Mine either.
You don't get to sexually harass people that often, that much, and that wantonly.
That often or that much.
And at all, period, and have it come out and still get my money. So, and it's unfortunate because I do like Brian Wood's writing.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
I have digressed, and I apologize for taking us down that little tangent.
No, it's all good.
Trail. Any last thoughts on the book, though?
It was good. I like it. I will keep reading it.
One other thing I'm looking forward to is the dynamic that they're going to get into as far as when you're dealing with a occupied country, because you still have the French authorities.
The Vichy France,
and then you have the SS. So how is that power balance going to be maintained, and how is that internal battle going to be drawn out?
Because they even allude to it at one point in the story.
So I'm looking forward to this story for many, many reasons.
Yeah. It's fun. There's a lot of places it can go.
Historical fiction is a great place to play in.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait. I'm definitely on this book. So, well, you know what people should do if they've read this and they have thoughts about it? Maybe they've got something to add. Maybe there's some context that we've missed that they want to throw in there. You know where they can do that at?
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
On Twitter.
Where Matt constantly lives.
Yeah, Matt lives on Facebook.
He does. He's just
his
there.
favorite place.
He's
many
steeped in it.
Faces and books.
We in fact have a group that you can become a member of if you're listening to this podcast. You like what we do. Maybe you want some more of it. Maybe you want to connect with us more than once a week. Maybe you want some feedback.
If you like it,
from
you
us.
love it, you want some more of it.
You didn't have to do that at all. You did not have to go there.
I protest.
That wasn't a thing that was necessary at all. But yeah, come be a part of our Facebook group. There's a lot of people there. We added almost 20 people last week, I think, close to it, at least 15.
I know I approved about 4 or 5.
Yeah, there was a lot. Our number jumped up, and I'm happy about that because that's more voices in the community, right? Like there's more people that we're talking about, and I would love to communicate with you. I would love to have these chats. I would love to hear your thoughts on the show, and you can do that. All you got to do, be a part of our Facebook group. You can hit us up on Twitter, and you can see what we're reading on Instagram too. We post little panels, pictures, and stuff like that. We're at SFG on both of those. And that's my shameless little plug. That was my injection into the social medias. So, Craig, why don't you tell us a book that you read this week that you really enjoyed?
I read a book called 20XX, number 1. It's by Image Comics, and it's Jonathan Luna and Lauren Keeley. Have either of you ever read a book that's been drawn or story by Jonathan Luna?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Alex and Ada, Eternal Empire. So his art has a very distinctive style, and it does in this book as well. But he does it all in black and white, so you get kind of a different feel. But he, without sounding like a snob, I don't particularly love art that's done, computer digital art. I don't particularly love it, but I realize that's a snob part of me because there's some good out there.
I don't think that's a snobbish thing to say. I mean, that's just a preference.
Well, Jonathan Luna does it really well, though.
Right.
And surprisingly, removing the color out of this book actually, to me, made it feel more hand-drawn, more traditional art. So, as you can tell by the title of this book, it is set somewhere in the 2000 in the next 80 years. It starts off with Maria, or Maria. I'm not sure how you say her name. It's Meria. Getting a phone call from work telling her she has been promoted to the editor position and could she please come see her boss as soon as she gets into work. Well, she's running late. She's trying to get there. She shows up at work, and the first thing you notice when she gets to work is she's now wearing a metal surgeon's mask. Mm-hmm. But all of the people at work are wearing this metal surgeon's mask that has like air filters on it. And she starts having this small talk conversation with a lady. She's like, I really don't have time. But the lady's like telling her about her friend got sick and he just died. And so she's, doesn't want to be a dick and run off and leave her friend sitting there telling the sad story. Well, all of a sudden she starts bleeding from her eyes.
As happens.
This just happens, right? So she starts bleeding from her eyes, and the emergency team shows up. The emergency workers show up, and they confirm she has something called the Bethel virus. And they rush her to the hospital, where we find out that this virus has a unusually high mortality rate of 99%. Or for those of you that aren't good at math, that means you have a 1% chance of surviving this.
That was for me. Thank you for clarifying.
Save me some time. I was punching that into my phone.
And then she dies, and that's the end of the story. No, that's not the end of the story. She actually survives. She wakes up 3 days later, and she finds out that she is a survivor. And one of the things that come with being a survivor is she's no longer contagious. She will have a lifelong immunity to it. And she will have a power that manifests itself. And she must report this power to the authorities within 30 days. And it's all these powers, these people, it's called selective telekinesis and sensing abilities. So STS for short. And they have to report it because they're very dangerous and they're not allowed to use them ever. They just, the authorities have to know. So if somebody dies by these sorts of powers, they know who to go to. So she leaves. She calls her work and she finds out that her both positions, the one she was promoted to and the one that she was in, have both been filled because, 99% mortality rate. They obviously didn't think she was going to make it. Well, at least that's what they lead you to believe. We find out later that there's some stuff that goes on between survivors and people that haven't ever obtained the virus. Mm-hmm. There's like this bias going back and forth, some bigotry happening between the two. And so she's got no job. She doesn't know where to turn. The only person she knows to reach out to is her cousin, who happened to be a survivor, but she hasn't talked to him in so long. She doesn't really know how to reach him. So she goes to this bar that he used to be known to going to. And she walks in and she's wearing her mask. And the first thing you notice in this bar is that no one in there is wearing a mask. So she goes up to the bartender and the bartender says, "Oh, you're either a norm," which, we don't discriminate against serving norms here, but I can't tell you that the rest of the customers in here won't discriminate against you. And then she says, "And if you're a sim," which is what they call the people that have survived, mm-hmm. She's like, wearing that shows that you're, shameful for surviving. And you can imagine how that's going to affect the other customers in here. So she takes off her mask, not wanting to start anything, and just explains she's, got this new thing. And she didn't really know how, what the dynamics of it were. So a guy walks up to her and starts talking to her. And he said, he's kind of heard her story. And he says, "Well, why don't you come with me?" And he takes her into this back room of this bar. And he's like, "As you can see, we all use our powers." Mm-hmm. And like, there's people levitating. There's a chick doing trapeze, but she's created the trapeze herself. There's not really a trapeze bar there for her. She's created the images that she's floating on.
Yeah, she's Green Lantern in it.
Yeah,
Is that a verb?
Yeah, there's people drinking, not using their hands. The glasses mm-hmm. are just floating to their mouths. All kinds of wacky stuff going on.
Not a good power.
Not a good power. Yeah.
Don't make drinking easier.
And so he tells her, he says, "Well, what do you sense?" And she says, "Well, I just left the hospital. I don't have my power yet." Right. He's like, "No, it doesn't take as long as they'd want you to believe." He's like, "Just concentrate." So she's concentrating and she's looking at him and she can see through him like he's an X-ray, except not just his bones, but all of his internal organs, right. Everything. Like his skin's not there, basically.
What a nightmare.
Right. And so she freaks out. She says, "I'm not ready for this." And she leaves. Well, backing up just a little bit, she'd found out that her cousin.
Wait a minute. Is she really Roddy Piper with glasses?
Yes.
Okay.
No. So when she went into the bar, one thing I neglected to mention was that she finds out that her cousin is no longer welcome there.
Right.
So she leaves and she's reaching out, and the phones in this era are all in their heads. So and they're attached to computers. If you read Alex and Ada, it's a very similar dynamic mm-hmm. Where they can connect to the internet or they can call people or whatever just through thought. And so she tells the computer in her head to look up every place that she's ever had interactions with her cousin in the past 10 years or whatever. And it searches and there's a huge number. Well, she picks one of them and she goes to it. We assume that it's probably not the first one, but she goes to this one looking for him, and it's a bakery, and he's hiding out in the back. Well, so she goes into the back of this bakery, and following her immediately in, like they don't even have a chance to really introduce, like to hug or say hi or anything. These other two people walk in and they start attacking him, and they're using like telekinetic powers against each other. Their knives are flying, it's a bakery. There's all kinds of weapons.
Right.
One of them starts to like force choke her and she yells, "Stop." And the dude's head explodes. And that's the last page in this book, and I'm going to let you guys look at this because
sure.
It's pretty freaking awesome. This book is really, really well done.
It's always interesting to me. So the first two things I ever read by
Jonathan Luna.
He wrote with his brother or his cousin.
Yeah, they were the Luna brothers.
It was his brother.
And then they kind of, something happened there, and Jonathan's went off doing his own thing, and everything. And when I say she explodes his head, like she removes everything on his skull.
Yeah, his skull is intact, but his skin has exploded off of the skull.
His eyeballs are still there. The skin, the muscles, everything in there is just gone.
Did you guys ever read The Sword? Because that was by him.
I did not read that one.
He drew that anyway.
I've heard that is really good.
Yeah, and so one of the things that he does really well, he's Pan Asian. I'm not sure where he's he may be. I hate saying that because you always see a person who's quote unquote foreign. They've been here their whole life, so I'm really not sure. As the white dude in the room, I'm not sure how to say that. He is of Asian descent. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm trying here, so don't get mad at me. So I'm not sure. Most of his books, they include. He's very big on inclusion, and he's big on giving people space.
So the main character in this is a black woman, and the guy that helps her out in the bar is an Asian man. There's a lot going on in this book. As you said, he's big on inclusion.
Yeah.
And it's, Jonathan Luna has a style. If you've seen a Jonathan Luna book and you pick up another Jonathan Luna book, when you look at it, hey, this is Jonathan Luna. You know it's him without ever looking at the cover. Well, or without ever looking at the credits. This book is told really well. The pacing on it is done just fantastic. It really... It's a dense book, and it gives you a lot of information, but without overwhelming you. And it does it in a way that you don't feel like, oh, this is a first issue and they're spelling it all out for me. You get information like, the virus has been around for 5 years because it happens in a conversation.
Right.
The guy's like, oh, well, you're dealing with 5 years of bias from the media. Well, that tells me that 5 years is how long they've been dealing with survivors of this virus. So, without just kind of ramming it down your throat, you get all this information.
It makes it a part of the story.
Yeah. And it just flows really well. And I did some homework. Lauren Keeley, I don't think, has ever done a published comic before. Maybe she's done some self-published stuff or whatever, but she's not done anything that I can find that's ever been published in a major publisher.
I'm not familiar at all.
Yeah, and if she has and you've read it, please let me know because I would like to read it, because I think what's happening here is they're doing the story together, then she writes the script and then he draws it. Is I believe what's happening, because they both have writing credits on it. Again, just the art, you can tell it's digital when you look at it, as you can all of Jonathan Luna's books. But for me, taking the color out of it actually made it feel less digital. You flip through it right now.
I would agree.
Yeah,
especially with the use of the, what do they call it, screen tone? It's a heavy screen tone style.
I mean, it's grays. There's a lot of grays in there. There's a lot of black and white. And that last page sold it for me, because I was like, what the hell's going on? This is a weird book. I didn't know if I liked it just because these people are surviving and they have force powers and they're basically Jedi.
It helped.
Probably,
Well,
but I didn't know that. But I tend to like books Jonathan Luna's on. If you haven't read Alex and Ada, you absolutely should.
The girls.
Yeah. If you haven't read Eternal Empire, you should.
I haven't read that. I need to.
It's really good. Books that he's on, I tend to automatically get, which is weird because I know I started this conversation saying I don't love digital art, but for some reason I always appreciate. So, a good book, a good story, well paced. The art was fantastic. Anytime I have a page where somebody's head's being ripped off their skull, I'm good. I'm sold. So
there's a few artists and writers that are like that for me. Obviously, I think Justin Jordan's like that for a lot of us. I need to think of that. We should do that at some point. We should come up a list because and list. It's a good segue time. We are, like a lot of podcasts, doing our favorites of 2019. You can find that link on the Facebook page. I'm not going to get too much into that, but one thing we, like everybody asks, is what was your favorite writer of this book? We should come up with a list of, like, not our quote-unquote favorite writers of the year, but who are the writers that are less known that we always pick up, no matter what? Like, who are the best of the less? Or, I don't know.
We live in Arkansas, so you have to core list.
Right.
Jeff Lemire, and by Corliss I mean there was a great basketball player in Arkansas named Corliss Williamson. If you're talking about the greatest basketball players that came out of Arkansas, everybody's going to say Corliss Williamson. So you Corliss that you're not going to talk about it. So you have to Corliss the Jeff Lemires and the Jonathan Hickmans, because we're all going to pick up those books. So, who's your lesser name? That'd be an interesting conversation.
We should do that at some point. Yeah. Also,
maybe
Scottie
for
Pippen
a chaos episode.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Yeah.
Do what?
Scottie Pippen was the name you were looking for the best basketball player to come out of Arkansas.
Both of them.
We just quit being a comics podcast. We just lost it. They're like, fuck it, they're going to talk about basketball.
No, I mean,
people are hitting the unsubscribe button.
Scottie Pippen was the best professional basketball player to come out of Arkansas. Corliss Williamson was the best college player to come out of Arkansas.
I believe you.
Outside of that, that's just.
I have a question as well. Is it still a good segue if you say it's a segue?
No.
Yes.
Maybe.
It can be.
Anytime
somebody says segue, anyways, I think of Weird Al Yankovic riding a Segway and singing about being white and nerdy.
Oh, I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing that back up. I'm going to segue back into my book of the week.
Is it white and nerdy?
Kind of. So I read a book. Actually, I did not read it this week. I read it about two and a half weeks ago. But I've been wanting to talk about it. And if you've been listening to the show, we've been really busy. We had some things going on, with our interviews and whatnot. So I picked up a book, and it was actually a book that I found on Kickstarter. And
one of my favorite places to find books, honestly.
Kind of gave it to some support, and got a copy in. And the book is called Pass Me By, but it's a series. The series is going to be called Pass Me By. This is book 1. It's called Gone Fishing. So it was kind of interesting. Thinking of a way to start talking about this book was difficult because there's a lot going on. It's a pretty straightforward story, but there's a lot of subtext. Like there's a lot underneath the surface. It uses the iceberg theory really well. And as I was thinking about this, there's a part in the book that kind of keyed me in on it. So, follow me here because it's gonna be a little. Have either of you ever been like cigarette smokers? You guys ever smoked cigarettes?
Yes.
So I smoked for a long time. I started smoking when I was 14. Imagine how that went over. And I quit for good about 3 years ago. Had a little blip about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, where I started smoking again, but I dropped them off again. Some smokers will tell you that when they quit, they don't ever think about it again. They don't want it. They don't like it. When I smell a cigarette, there is nothing more that I want in the world. That sweet tobacco smell when somebody walks, especially if I can pinpoint it, I know it.
Is that what you consider that smell?
I do. I think tobacco smells sweet. But when somebody has smoked, especially a Camel Light, which was my brand, also kids don't smoke. It's bad. It's bad for you. I pinpoint it, and I want one. I start salivating. I know, I miss it. I miss the act of smoking. I miss the smell. I miss the repetition of it. But do you know why I quit?
Health.
Most people quit. It's healthy. It will kill you. I quit because I don't want to get things like cancer and all. You read the Surgeon General warning. They put it on the packet for your convenience, so they can what you're doing.
I don't want my children to be born with birth defects.
I'm not having kids, so that is a big thing. Sodomy is making that happen for me. But I can guarantee you, with nothing, with no lie in my heart, being fully honest, if I found out today that something else was going to kill me, I would go to the nearest gas station and I would buy a pack of cigarettes and I would go sit on my back porch and I would smoke a Camel. And I would enjoy that sweet, sweet tobacco flavor. Now, what does that have to do with this book? Well, this book centers around a character named Ed, and Ed's an older guy. And he's not quite an octogenarian, but he's in his later years. And he's kind of a reserved guy. Like he's kind of like he presses his shirts. He's all put together. He's the little old man. He's kind of Mr. Rogers. He's got a little sweater on, and he's very kempt. And he's going about his business and getting ready to go on his day and everything. And Ed's got a friend. He's been his lifelong friend forever. I mean, these guys, they go way back. And his friend's named Rory. And Rory's the exact opposite. Rory is a deadhead. He's a hippie. He's that old guy who's still got a ponytail, but he's got also like a receding hairline that he won't get rid of. He drives a van, and he's got a vanity plate that says "Free Love." Like, he's that guy. But they've been able, even though they're two different people, they come from two different worlds, they've been able to maintain their friendship. And in their later years, Rory has been going and spending a lot of time with Ed. They go fishing, mainly because Ed doesn't have a lot of time left. The story is very honest about that. It's not hiding the ball from you. Ed is in either the early stages of dementia, or I'd say the early stages. He's either full-blown in dementia or he's got the early stages of Alzheimer's. As I've told you guys on the show, I think we talked about it in October, that's my biggest fear. Like, the thought of getting Alzheimer's and having the world slip away from me, it's terrifying. So to me, this book reads like a horror story, but it's not really. It's just a story about a guy who's trying to cope, and whose family and community is trying to cope with him. And so they go fishing, and you get these little moments where he's starting to slip. And as they're fishing, they're talking about Rory's life and asking about how everything's going. And Rory's got an ex-wife that he's still really good friends with. I mean, he's, like I said, he's a hippie. Special kind of person who can keep up with their exes and still be friends. And he's a genuinely good person. He's paying for his ex-wife's kids to go to college. He helped raise them. It's not his biological children, but he still considers himself their father. And Ed's just like, why are you doing that? Like, and he's, we've had this conversation before, Ed, like, I've told you why, like this, like, we're not having this conversation again. So there's some weird dynamics, and they do things like they go sit at the diner together, and that where the cigarette conversation involves Ed sees a guy driving by and he's smoking. And all of he thinks about these things, and they get into why he quit and how he's thinking about starting smoking again, just because it's not going to kill him. Alzheimer's is going to kill him. His clock is ticking. He's come up to reach the end. He lives alone. His wife is gone. His wife has passed away. He's got a daughter that doesn't speak to him anymore. And so as the clock ticks closer to the end, he's trying to really kind of find out what kind of person he was, what kind of person he is, what kind of person he wants to be while he's still here. He's trying to appreciate the friendships while also being just genuinely scared out of his mind, or what little mind he has left. He doesn't know. He doesn't know where to go. And luckily he has a supportive community that really cares for him. And so, they go to the diner, and he's having a conversation with the waitress who knows him, and she's checking on him. And she makes a joke about threatening to put Rory down for him if she needs to. It's just really lighthearted funeral of people who know you. As the book goes on, there's a few more fishing trips, and his disease progresses. It's starting to slip away even more. He digs into his closet, and he finds this old leather jacket from when he was a young man. And he thinks about, like, he has this memory, this precious memory, something that he's losing every day. It comes back to him. And it's about him and Rory as younger men, where his brother had a old Volkswagen Woody, one of those old, like, it was a Bug with like the wooden side panels that his brother, he wrecked it, and he thought it wasn't any good anymore. So he gave it to Rory and Ed, and they fixed it up to be kind of a dune buggy type thing. And in the memory, the flashback, which is mostly done in these beautiful shades of pink that shift from light pink to just hard pink, Ed is on the top of it, like with both hands, like on the top of the car, like gripping the sides of the car as they're just flying through, and they're getting chased by the cops because they're on somebody else's land. And so, you imagine this getaway in this old buggy where this hippie's driving and this kind of straight-laced, cut-and-paste white dudes holding on to the top of the car for the dear life as they're slinging and going everywhere. It's this beautiful memory, and it kind of gives you some insight into his and Rory's relationship and their history. And he holds on to that memory for a little bit. And it's wonderful. Like, it's this great thing. And it slips away from him. And he doesn't remember it, but you do as the reader. And to me, that's a powerful move. So, story continues. There's this really great scene where he gets pulled over. He's driving. He's coming home from the doctor's office, and he forgets what he's doing. He forgets where he's at. He doesn't know what the speed limit is, so he gets pulled over. He doesn't need to be driving. He's losing things that we take for granted every day. I can't imagine, and this is something that older people, whether or not they have dementia or not, have to deal with, the right to drive, the ability to have that mobile freedom. I can't imagine what it's like to lose that, and that's something that we're all going to face at some point. And so he gets pulled over by the cop, and the cop's like, hey, what's going on? And he knows the cop. They go way back, and they're friends. Of course, he's frustrated and aggravated because he doesn't know these things. And the cop kind of gets into him a little bit, and he smarts off to the cop like he's getting a ticket, right? The cop, I mean, at the end of it, the cop lets him go because he's not a dick. But but it's just this moment of frustration.
So it is fiction.
Of dealing with life. And he goes home, and as he gets home, he's sitting there. And remember earlier I mentioned he has a daughter that he's kind of estranged from. Doesn't have a good relationship with her, and her daughter has kids. His daughter's not quite like, again, shades of gray. His daughter's not a bad person. His daughter's not a good person. His daughter's a person. His daughter's going through some things, and his daughter does not know that he's got dementia. Doesn't know that he's in these stages of Alzheimer's. He hasn't told her that yet. He wants to. He's scared of what happens when it happens, because at the end of the day, his daughter still has rights and can maybe stick him in a home. He can lose that freedom. He doesn't know what he needs to do. Well, his daughter calls him and says, hey, like, I'm having some trouble. I need some things. Can you help me out? And he can't. He wants to. And basically, his daughter wants to send his grandchild, who he doesn't know that well, to come stay with him for 2 weeks while she works some shit out. Like, I think she's getting divorced or something. And he's like, I need you to take care of my kid so I can get this handled. I never ask you for anything. This is the first thing I've asked you to for years. This could be the way we get our life back together. Obviously, that's an issue. He's got dementia. He should not be in charge of a child. But he also can't tell his daughter that. And so he tries to, like, wiggle his way out of it. And she's just like, I never asked you for anything. How could you do, like, every time I come to you, like, it's a breaking of a familial relationship. And it's heartbreaking. It's like, as the reader, it's shattering. Because this is beyond being a rock in a hard place. So he caves. And as this book comes to an end, the next book's going to pick up where his grandchild comes and stays with him. And hopefully that's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be an interesting dynamic, seeing these kids. I have no idea. I'm not even sure when the next version of it comes out. By the way, I should mention this book takes place in Canada, where they have things like good health care. So that's not an issue. If you were worried that was going to be the issue where the story goes, nope, Canada actually cares about their people. And so he's able to get the help he needs. And so he's getting treated. And so the next book is going to pick up dealing with this other interpersonal relationship, this other familial relationship. And I can't wait to see where it goes. This is a book. It's full of the fifis. Like this is a book that
sounds like Matt's going to read this book.
Matt's going to love it. No
one's head
no one's head explodes. No one's beheaded. There is no violence. Although him and Rory almost get into it for a minute, as friends are wont to do. But they can do that. Like,
well, dementia also causes aggravated emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The book is incredible.
Heightened anger.
As far as the art goes, I mean, if the story wasn't enough, the art, the way it's depicted is stunning. There's these moments of really poetic lettering that are done in script. Most of the story is told. It's a digital book. Most of the story is told in these shades of teal and pink. I think there was a book a while back that I let you borrow that was kind of the same way. There's a book called Adrian and the Tree of Secrets, which is another book that I think from the same publisher that put this out, but it's kind of the same way. You get these shades of teal and pink, these kind of binary colors, and you get all the different shades in them.
I kind of love when they do a book with minimal colors.
It is. You're getting two shades.
Or you get a black and white book with just a pop of color that really, I really enjoy when artists take those kinds of chances and it works.
Yeah,
so.
But don't think by me saying that the book is not heavily detailed. I mean, there's a scene right here where the landscape is these two like tracos digging up dirt and putting them as they're driving by the Canadian countryside, putting them in the dump trucks. It's heavily detailed. No, these are full blown tracos.
Oh wow.
Yeah. The country boy. There's a thing.
Jesus Christ.
Let me teach you about some farming.
No, Craig. Track hose. Okay.
But the book it's heavily
I stand
detailed
corrected.
with insanely.
I tried to correct and I was corrected. Firmly put back in my place.
It happens. You do it to me all the time.
I'm playing,
gosh. I was really hoping this argument about heavy equipment would go further.
How did your podcast end? Well, Caleb and Craig beat the shit out of each other talking
over
about farm
backhoes and trackhoes. No, I'm playing, brother. Go on.
But the detail in this is stunning, and just the artistic influence they put on this, the tension, the way that the colors, depending on how he's doing that day, how Ed is, how sharp he is, that's how either light the colors are going to be, or if it's that vivid memory that I was telling you about.
Oh, okay.
Those colors, I mean, you look at like these and the shades,
They get darker. And
they get darker and brighter. There's this one scene where he finds he digs out in that jacket I was telling you about. He reaches in the pocket and it's his wife's lipstick. And he's this older man and he just looks at his wife's lipstick. And it's this bright shade of red, this almost dark pink, because it's a vivid memory. The memory of the dune buggy, dark pink, heavy pink, vivid memory. The moments where he's trying to forget, he's talking to the cop, it's almost like there's a lens over it, something that obfuscates it. Just it washes the color out because he's having trouble. He's having trouble seeing everything in his mind. Stunning work. I can't wait to see more from this team. Like I said, written by Kyle Simmers. I don't know if I said that at first. Shame on me if I didn't. Written by Kyle Simmers, drawn by Ryan Danny Owen.
nice.
Just stunning work.
When I have some time and I want to cry, I will borrow it.
Jesus.
You will. It's a heavy book. It's a really heavy book. But the sequential storytelling is amazing. The panel layouts are outstanding. The way it shifts, the connective tissue of the work is stunning. Like this is a prime example of an artist and a writer who have some synchronicity. They're on the same page and they know how to make the book something beyond what it just could be. Like they see the potential in it. And they use it to connect with the tone of story. Sometimes you get these stories where you've got your story and you've got your art and they're just kind of cut and paste. Like you've got your story that just is telling a story. Your art just coincides with that, but there's no overlap. There's no blending. To me, the duality of what it is to write comics and of what it is to make comics, if you get the tone of the story to mash up with the story, like you get them playing back and forth with each other, you pull a little this way, you pull a little that way, you've got comics, man. And that's magic. That's
I love it
magic.
when it merges like that, or when it intentionally doesn't.
Yeah, where you've
like
got
Outer Darkness,
two
where,
stories happening at the same time.
Or
So-
well, you got like Outer Darkness, where you've got like this very cartoonist style with
Right.
you know. So both ways work when it's intentional. It's when it's unintentional that and you can tell.
Yeah.
when you're reading
Comics
a
are
book,
motherfucking magic, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. That's the good magic. So, what'd you read this week, Matt? Bring it.
So what I've been reading lately, I've been reading some trade paperbacks of Slain from 2000 AD. So the one I'm going to talk about was this. So this is the first trade paperback collection of the first stories published by Rebellion. This is called Slain, Warriors Dawn. This is the collection of the first Slain stories originally published in 2000 AD in the early 80s. The character was created by Pat Mills and Angie Kincaid. So all the stories are written by Pat Mills. The art in this trade is by Angie Kincaid, Massimo Bellar Delanelli, and Mike McMahon. The character's full name is Slain McRoth. That's how us in America would say it. However, that is not how you actually say it. This is a Celtic name, so it's actually pronounced Slanye McRoth.
Okay.
I love when he looks at me because he knows I cannot pronounce any Celtic names.
Craig and I have had this conversation about Celtic pronunciations, so that's why this is a
Speak
topic.
phonetically, bitches.
So these, but I'm never. Yeah, I'm going to say Slain because
There's the title of your.
Speak phonetically, bitches.
The setting for this character is in, I guess you would call it prehistoric Ireland during a fantasy barbarian age. This is high fantasy based heavily on actual Celtic legends and beliefs. Slain is a member of the northern tribe called the Cesars, and he is an elite warrior. He's a member of what's called the Red Branch. So within this northern tribe, they have their elite their elite warriors are divided into the Red Branch, and they're given special training because, frankly, they're capable of it, and they can do things like throw spears with their feet. They can do something called the salmon leap, which is jump the entire height of their body. They can do all these extra things in battle. He's called.
It's probably pronounced like Shaman Leap, though.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah.
Do they have salmon in Ireland?
Oh, they do.
Do they?
Yeah. Salmon. Yeah, that's salmon is a huge part of the diet in Ireland and Scotland.
Look at Pat Mills teaching us things.
Yeah, I learned that from going there, and
I'm not cultured or traveled.
yeah,
So
because you have Atlantic salmon and Pacific salmon. So yeah. Anywho,
what now? Are they doing an Atlantic salmon leap or are they doing a Pacific salmon leap?
he didn't
Was it an
specify.
African sparrow? Or?
Yeah. Are you suggesting?
He hates us. He hates us so much.
God, I never get tired of talking about Monty Python. Bring that up anytime. So in the opening, Slain is called a mercenary, a cattle rustler, and a battle smiter. He carries a stone-bladed axe that he calls the Brain Biter. I think it's a
I
pretty
like it already.
Yeah, Brain Biter. He has 2 humanoid skulls with fangs that hang from his kilt on chains. There's no explanation given from where these come from.
Do you really need one?
I'm hoping somewhere in this reading that will be expanded on why he has these on his kilt. He is a worshiper of the earth goddess called Danu and the sun god known as Lug. Danu has gifted him with what's called the warp spasm. This is when the earth goddess chooses warriors, and the warp spasm is an extreme version of a berserker rage.
Gotcha.
He enters in a berserker rage, and the earth goddess moves power from the earth through him, and he transforms into what's called an indescribable monstrous form, and he's essentially invulnerable.
Oh, wait, is this what happens when you fuck the dirt?
I was thinking the same thing. An earth spasm is what happens.
I would be doing it every day if that was the case.
Come see me on top of the mountain.
So he's in the opening of his first stories, he's been a wanderer, and he's been a wanderer for years because he was actually cast out of his tribe for having an affair with a woman the king of the tribe had chosen as a bride. Well, the king has recently died, so now his adventures are actually occurring as he makes his way back home. His travel companion is an elvish-looking dwarf named Uko, and it is Uko who is actually the narrator of most of the Slain stories. Uko, he describes him as a business partner. He's a master locksmith. He allegedly has some business sense. It's not all that strong, but Slain has basically none.
Yeah.
Being a warrior. So, they end up, they don't particularly like each other, but they work together. Uko needs somebody to protect him. He's a small elvish dwarf who would not make it long on his own. But, Slain smacks the crap out of him on a regular basis.
like you do.
Yeah. So Slain's tribe, their primary enemy are called the Droon Lords. Now they are based in the south. There's essentially 2 groups of people in this land: the northern tribes, the southern tribes. The southern tribes are made up of the Droon Lords. They are fully immersed in the sorcery of the land. They use what's called weird stones. These are basically megaliths like Stonehenge.
Spelled W-Y-R.
W-E-I-R-D. Weird stones. Now, these were an actual thing that the Celts believed in. That's what Stonehenge is. And there are other stones in Ireland today that still exist.
Yeah.
They're also called the Blue Stones. I've seen this on the History Channel being talked about. So they use these stones and ley lines to draw the power from the land, but they do so excessively, and it sours the earth. So in the south, the land is basically like just a swamp because they've pulled too much energy, mystical energy, from the earth, and it's ruined it. They do not, these Droons, they do not bathe because they believe that maintaining that unclean state adds to their power. If they wash, their power would be diminished.
They're washing the earth off of them, yeah.
They call their stink their mystic aura. So every time they meet somebody, they're like, "Oh, the filth." He's like, "Oh, yes, what you're taking in is my mystic aura." They wear their warriors. The Droons warriors are called skull swords, and they all wear these helmets with these hair masks that filters out as much smell as possible from their masters. Yeah. The design is pretty wicked, obviously. Their supreme leader is called the Lord Weird Slough-Feg, and he is their supreme leader. He lives in caves, so he can be as closer to they're more immersed into the earth power that they use. And all of his skin has sloughed off. He's, being this immersed in the earth's power gives these guys a natural long life, and their leader is about 20,000 years old.
It's a lot of years.
Yeah. And they
well, yes, it is.
they worship a worm god of the mounds called the Crom Crosh. Crom is the first half of that.
Well, and that's loosely based off of Crom Cruac. So
yeah. Well, and again, you said it. There's basically a difference in pronunciation.
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's the setting, the basic setting for the Slain stories. The art on this book is, so starting out, the stories were done by Angela Kincaid.
Were these any of the stuff done by Glenn Fabry?
Glenn Fabry did some later.
Okay, gotcha.
So I just finished reading, also just wrapped up reading the second trade paperback, and Glenn Fabry did a lot of art in
Okay,
that.
yeah. As you were talking, I was looking up some of the artwork.
Yeah.
Not to derail it, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
So.
Angela Kincaid was actually a children's author and illustrator.
Something went wrong.
So Pat Mills brought her in to help design this character. And, some interesting things, at the time, all the most popular English comic characters, they all wore helmets. This was the first one that was developed and was actually popular that didn't wear a helmet. Pat, and he said that she developed some awesome looking helmets, and none of them, he's like, that doesn't feel right. So finally, he just said, just do it without a helmet. And he's like, she nailed it. It was great. And that was the only direction that he gave her, other than don't make him big and bulky. I want him to look like a strong tribal person, but not the big, bulky
Conan. Make him Conan.
Yeah,
but,
Conan, appearance.
Yeah, he's very lean.
Yeah. That's the way Pat Mills had intended him to be. Simon Bisley did some work later, and of course Simon Bisley draws everybody bulky, so he's a little bit bulkier in the Simon Bisley stuff that came years later. It's wonderful. It's awesome. It's just a little bit different appearance. The Massimo Bellardellinelli, God, I can never get his name right.
Yeah, that one's
It's
you
a
get a pass
mouthful.
on that one.
It's if I slow down well enough, I can say it right. But anyway, it's he's an illustrator. Okay, so this was a very interesting experience to read this comic that was done by a straight up illustrator, as opposed to somebody who is an animator. His backgrounds and his stills are amazing to look at. They're deep. They're just amazing. And this is all black and white, by the way.
Yeah.
There's no color.
Yeah.
But his anatomy is hit or miss. I mean, his strength is not drawing the human anatomy, let alone drawing the human anatomy in action. His action scenes look stiff as all get out. But I mean, give him a still to do, and it's great to look at. It looks killer. So, and Pat Mills, and I went back and read some, I read Pat Mills' first book, and he talks about that, and he got a lot of pushback from fans. They're like, man, the guy's anatomy. I mean, you're talking about drawing characters in action. It's just stiff. So, but after this guy did some illustrating for a lot of the stories. Mike McMahon picked up after him. Now, Mike McMahon is a very interesting artist. This guy's style has altered radically several times throughout his career. It's hard to believe it's the same guy. I just finished reading the Cursed Earth saga, the Judge Dredd Cursed Earth saga. Mike McMahon did that whole thing. And he's a great animator. Very, very good animator, drawing action scenes, and he's just a great comics guy. when he took over Slain, he radically changed his style. And the first time I ever picked up a Slain story was his, and I was like, oh God, it's visually, I was like, ugh. But if you read it, if you stay with it and you look through it, the panels are very, very, again, it's still very well done when it comes to animation, and him drawing an action scene is awesome, especially a crowded action scene with a battle scene.
Right.
You get the very strong sense of chaos, every character having their own movements. He draws people asymmetrically. So it just feels very, very organic. And there's a lot of movement with his art. It takes some getting used to.
Yeah. Well, it's very, this is an interesting conversation because people think that, if you can draw comics.
No, yeah, and that's
they're two different things, because being able to draw action is a very difficult thing.
Yeah, and is that ever expelled out in this trade paperback? Because it's something. It was an experience.
So I just found out something interesting about Slain. Now, I don't know a lot about Slain. I've seen him. I knew he was a character. As I was looking at him, his visage, the way his appearance comes out, I was, just off the top of my head, I was like, oh, he looks like Lobo. He looks like a man version of Lobo. Because they've got the slits over his eyes and
the war paint.
Yeah, the very muscular. They both came out 1983. They were both issue 330 of 2000 AD was the first appearance of Slain. And that's where he popped out at. And then I don't remember off the top of my head the first issue of that Lobo appeared in, but English writer, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on that. 1983. They both came out at the same time. So it's interesting culturally how that plays off of each other, because they do look a lot alike.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a fun fact.
Yeah. Yeah. His appearance he's got a great character design. I love Slane's character design. He's very tribal looking, very just dirty, just metal, man.
Yeah.
Just looks metal. His war kilt is always, I love looking at the different interpretations of his war kilt. It's killer.
Omega Man 3, June of 1983. Okay. We have the first appearance low. Sweet.
Yeah. So this first trade was, pretty, I guess you would say a pretty traditional barbarian wanderer type story. The second trade fucking gets weird.
Wait. This wasn't weird enough?
No. Negatory. It gets wacky weird, man. I'm like, what? It's, because part of this, this cover has got Slain battling a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Well, this is called a time monster in this universe, because what these drones do is they open up time portals and bring dinosaurs in and direct them towards their enemies. So, time monsters. Well, in the second trade, he goes through the time portal.
Gotcha.
And dude, bro, they have guns that utilize ley line powers, so they're firing ley lines at people. It's wacky.
Oh, Pat Mills.
Oh, yeah.
On Matt's tombstone, it's going to say it was written by Pat Mills. I'm going to have I'm going to purposefully, if I'm still alive, I'm going to have them chisel it was written by Pat Mills.
We'll just go later with a chisel and a hammer and just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Man,
so it looks, archaic.
Yeah, it's you. If you're looking for something unique, this is something unique.
Can I borrow that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to have some time over this Christmas break to actually do some reading. So
Yeah.
I want to take that home with me if I can.
Yeah. I highly recommend it. The Mike McMahon stuff. When I initially picked up a Slain book, it really put me off. But the more I looked at it, the more I started appreciating it, and it evolves. He evolves as he does more Slain work.
He's trying to pre-warn you that when you
Oh, that's
read
okay.
it.
I mean, yeah.
I'm looking at as he's flipping through, and some of the art's just absolutely gorgeous.
It's stunning.
Very unique.
Yeah.
And it just has a very unique feel to it.
Well, it is
fluid.
It is that 2000 AD early British
heavy metal,
pre-British invasion. Highly. I don't. Well, it's not necessarily. It is detailed, but it's more than just detailed. It's heavily imbued, maybe is the what I'm looking for, of darks. Like there's not a lot of shading involved, but there's just a lot involved. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah,
It's a very European style art.
Mm-hmm.
And I dig it. Well, guys, we're getting a little long in the tooth on this one. You ready to bring this one back home?
Yep.
Did you want to have anything you needed to finish up? Or
No, that was pretty much.
Matt actually started reading again, so I think he forgot that we were doing a podcast. He's like, I'm going to revisit this book real quick. So he's like, this is better than that. Well, let's do this. Let's bring this thing home. As we are wont to do on this show, we like to end it. We like to send you guys and girls and gender non-conforming people off into the world with a little bit of an idea of what we're going to pick up on this next Wednesday, because Wednesdays are new comic book days. It's when the new stuff hits in your local comic book shop. And we encourage you guys to get out and know your community, get out and go to the bookshop, meet your proprietors, become involved in the community. If you're in Central Arkansas, you can come meet Craig. Some days you can come meet Matt. Some days you can come meet me at our little local spot, Kapow Comics, over in Sherwood. That's a little suburb of Little Rock. But we just get involved in your local comics community and find some friends. Get out of the house. Get out in front of the TV. You don't need to be watching that shit. You need to be meeting folks and talking about comics like we do. And so, in saying that, I have a book that I think everyone should go out and buy this next week. It's something that's already been printed. If you own a copy of it, you're excused. That's fine. But I'm a big fan of David Mack. I love David Mack's style. I think it's gorgeous. The work he did on the book I'm about to tell you about is that they've made coffee table book things out of it that quote unquote not normies, quote unquote not comic people buy, because it's stunning work. And the book I'm talking about is, of course, if you know David Mack, it's Kabuki. Well, they are putting out Kabuki Omnibus Volume 1. It's a little bit pricey. It's $30. Not too bad. I mean, for an omnibus, that's not bad at all. Like if you're buying omnibus, I'm looking at a stack of them that are $75, $100 a piece, $150 a piece. So not an insane price for an omnibus whatsoever, but $30. It's close to Christmas. It's a thing, right? Like that's an expense.
Right.
But it's well worth it, man. So go check that out. It's again David Mack's Kabuki Omnibus Volume 1. Gonna be great on your shelf. Gonna be great on my shelf if you're buying it for me. So. What are you reading, or what do you got going on, Matt?
So I'm looking forward to Marvel Comics Doom 2099 by Chip Zdarsky, Castiello, and Sotomayor. Just got last names there. So I'm just basically on for this because I want to see how Zdarsky's going to write Doom. That's really it.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for a good Doom story for what seems like years. So maybe this will be the one. So yeah, that's why I'm looking forward to this one.
I've got Red Mother #1.
Yeah, I figured
Studios.
you were going to do that one. So
That's why I was letting you guys go first. Jeremy Hahn and Danny Luckert. After losing her eye and the man she loves in a brutal mugging, Daisy McDonough is left trying to put the pieces of her life back together. Just when she thinks she can heal, move on, she begins to see strange things in her prosthetic eye. So that's the description given. It's Jeremy Hahn, so I'm going to pick it up. He's one of those that would be on my short list. If he's on it, I'm going to pick it up.
right.
We
need to reach out to Jerry and make sure Jerry knows this book is coming out and that he has it.
Well, if he's listening to the show like he should be,
he
as
should
a good
be.
friend.
He should be, but sometimes he doesn't. So we need to make sure he knows this and is getting a copy because he loves Jeremy.
Yeah,
Loves
absolutely.
that man.
So yeah, it's what I'm most excited about this week. This month's going to be one of those months that they don't overdo it in December. Usually with comics, it's kind of they kind of bring out some omnibuses, they do things like that, but they don't overdo it with here's 1,000 new books starting in December. So
It's a little tough on the old wallet.
yeah. So
Well, guys, we got anything else we need to throw out there into the world? Any hellos, goodbyes, any things? No? All right, cool. Well, let's wrap this up. As we have mentioned, we do, in fact, have a Facebook group, and we invite you, we implore you, we beg you. Come hang out with us there. Come post what you're reading. Come, if you find any cool articles floating around, anything of interest that you're like, hey, this is awesome, I need to share it with somebody.
it's a really good one. And
Yeah.
it's fun, and I'll probably visit there again.
I love you. There's an inside joke there. So it's a great place. There's lots of people there talking about things. Of course we're talking about comics, right? But we're also we're talking about TV. We're digging The Mandalorian. We're talking about who's doing what, when, and how as Christmas or Hanukkah or the other
Speaking of
holidays.
Mandalorian, those Spurs at the end of the last
Oh,
episode.
dude.
We know who that is.
Oh, son. Spoiler warning.
Hey, we gave spoiler warning at the beginning of the shit.
That's true. But yeah, all of those things, they're being talked about right here, right now on our Facebook group, Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. Type it in the search bar. Come hang out with us. Come tell us what you're doing. We'd love to hear from you. Of course, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at SFG Podcast on both of those. If you've got a question, comment, concern, maybe you've got a topic we need to cover. Maybe you have a question. Maybe you've got a complaint about, what could it be this week? Could it be me? Maybe I talk about law school too much, which you're sitting there, you're like, fuck it, you're doing it again. Got to send off an email. Do that at southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If you happen to follow us on Twitter or our Facebook page, you're going to see pinned to both of those things a Google form. It will take you to a site to where you get to vote. You get to vote on what your favorite thing this year was. It can be anything. There are no wrong answers. We just want to hear from you because either the first or second week of January, we're going to put together a revisiting of the favorite things, a celebration of 2019 comics. And we want your input as readers and listeners. It's not just about us. I mean, it's mostly about us. It's mostly about Craig.
Spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of Immortal Hulk.
What a bold prediction.
But if you want, maybe Immortal Hulk's not your thing and you want to put it out there in the world, you got to vote. You got to vote to do that. We don't know what you're doing unless you vote. And it's real easy. It costs you 0 things. You just type in your email address and it saves it. Maybe you're looking at, there's a topic and you're like, oh, I don't know right now. I need to go figure this out. Just leave it blank. You put your email address in there. You can come back and revisit later. You can change your vote. Nothing's set in stone. And we would really appreciate it if you would do that.
Yeah, and the way we're going to do that is if we have enough votes from everybody, we will list the votes. Whoever, whatever the winners are, we'll each have our vote for each topic, and then we'll tell what our listeners or fans, if you want to call it that,
family,
what their response is. We're obviously not going to read them all. It'll be whoever wins in the fan group voting.
And it's always cool because we feed off each other a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's always cool to get kind of an outside influence on what other people are liking.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that. So
if it's not Immortal Hulk, you're wrong.
Yeah, maybe you don't like Immortal Hulk.
I had to say it for somebody.
How can that happen?
Well, we'll be right here, same Hulk time, same Hulk channel next week. Go forth, love some comics, guys.
Woo!
That was a good woo. You keep nailing the woo game.
Nailing the woo game.
That's I word good sometimes.
Nailing the Wu-Tang.
I need to watch that. I have not watched the Wu-Tang show yet. That's got to happen.
I'm not a Wu-Tang. I mean, I can't say I'm not. I've never listened to them, really. The Wu-Tang special.
There's a Wu-Tang documentary on Netflix, I think. So
it's a television show. It was like 8 or 10 episodes long on Amazon.
Written by the same guy that wrote the book that we read last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Yeah, pretty sure. Anyway, bye, guys.